Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and every day I get to share a piece of history that I think you'll find as fascinating as I do. Today, we're heading to Pearl Harbor, Hawaii on December 7, 1941, the day that, as President Roosevelt said, would live in infamy. At 7:48 a.m., Japanese aircraft appeared over the American naval base and launched a devastating surprise attack that killed over 2,400 Americans, destroyed or damaged 8 battleships, and pulled the United States into World War II. And here's what troubles me most about this moment. It wasn't really a surprise. The evidence was there. The warning signs existed. But we weren't looking in the right direction. Understanding why Pearl Harbor happened and how we failed to see it coming despite multiple warnings teaches us something crucial about how intelligence fails, how organizations fixate on the wrong threats, and why we keep missing the warnings until it's too late. Picture this. It's a quiet Sunday morning in Hawaii, December 7th, 1941. Most of the Pacific Fleet is moored at Pearl Harbor. Battleships lined up in neat rows along Battleship Row, aircraft carriers out at sea on exercises, sailors sleeping in or eating breakfast, the base operating on its relaxed weekend schedule. In Washington, it's early afternoon, and diplomats are preparing for meetings. The world is at war. Europe is burning. Japan is expanding through Asia. But America is still technically at peace. Then, at 7:48 a.m. Hawaiian time, the first wave of Japanese aircraft appears. Torpedo bombers, dive bombers, fighters, 183 aircraft in the first wave. They come in low over the harbor. The attack is devastating and swift. Torpedoes slam into battleships. Bombs rain down on airfields where American planes are parked wingtip to wingtip, easy targets. By the time the second wave arrives at 8:50 a.m., Pearl Harbor is already in flames. The USS Arizona explodes when a bomb penetrates her forward magazine. She sinks in 9 minutes, taking 1,177 sailors with her. The USS Oklahoma capsizes, trapping over 400 men inside. Sailors scramble from burning, sinking ships. Airfields are destroyed. Nearly all American aircraft are damaged or destroyed on the ground before they can take off. In less than 2 hours, the Japanese sink or damage 18 ships, destroy over 180 aircraft, and kill 2,403 Americans. Here's the thing that I always wonder about. What was going through Admiral Husband Kimmel's mind as he watched this unfold from his headquarters? He was the commander of the Pacific Fleet, responsible for defending Pearl Harbor. And as he stood there, watching his ships burning, his sailors dying, he reportedly muttered, "It was God's mercy I survived to tell the story." But he also knew, he had to know, that people would ask, how did this happen? How did we not see this coming? Let me build the clock for you, because understanding what warnings existed and why they weren't heeded reveals something profound about how intelligence failures happen and why organizations often can't see threats even when evidence is staring them in the face. Think about it this way. The conventional narrative is that Pearl Harbor was a complete surprise, a bolt from the blue that no one could have predicted. But here's what the evidence actually tells us. We knew war with Japan was likely. We knew their fleet had disappeared from home waters. We'd broken their diplomatic codes and were reading their communications. We had multiple warning indicators that something was coming. So, why were we surprised? Here's where my investigator's training becomes crucial, because this isn't about one person failing. This is about how the entire intelligence and command system failed to connect the dots. Let me walk you through what we knew. In late November, the U.S. had sent war warnings to commanders in Hawaii and elsewhere. We knew Japan was planning military action somewhere in the Pacific. We'd broken the Japanese diplomatic code called Purple and were reading their messages. We knew they were breaking off negotiations. We knew they were destroying code books in their embassies. We knew war was imminent. But, and this is critical, we thought the attack would come in the Philippines, or Malaysia, or the Dutch East Indies. We were focused on those targets because that's where the resources Japan needed were located. That's where logic said they should attack. Pearl Harbor, thousands of miles from Japan across the Pacific, seemed unlikely, even impossible, for a surprise attack. Think about the position Admiral Kimmel and General Walter Short were in. They'd received war warnings. They were on alert, but their understanding of the threat was shaped by assumptions that Japan wouldn't risk attacking Pearl Harbor, that the real danger was sabotage from the local Japanese population, that air attack was less likely than submarine attack. So, what did they do? They prepared for the threats they expected. Aircraft were parked close together to guard against sabotage, making them perfect targets for air attack. Sailors were given liberty on the weekend. Long-range reconnaissance patrols weren't being flown because they required resources and manpower. Radar stations were operating, but on limited schedules. The whole base was at a peacetime weekend posture while preparing for threats that didn't materialize and completely missing the one that did. Here's what the investigator in me notices. Multiple warning signs existed that morning, but the system couldn't process them in time. At 7:02 a.m., a radar station picked up a large formation of aircraft approaching from the north. The operators reported it, but the officer who received the report assumed they were American B-17 bombers expected from California. The context, his expectations about what should be there, overrode what the radar was actually showing. Earlier that morning, an American destroyer had sunk a Japanese midget submarine trying to enter Pearl Harbor. They reported it. But the report got lost in the system, not flagged as the urgent warning it should have been. In Washington, American cryptographers had decoded the final part of Japan's diplomatic message, which ended negotiations and was clearly a prelude to war. They tried to get a warning to Hawaii, but it was Sunday morning. Secure communications were difficult. The warning that should have arrived hours before the attack didn't reach Kimmel until after the bombs were falling. I find myself thinking about this. None of these failures was catastrophic by itself. The radar operator who reported the aircraft did his job. The destroyer crew that sank the submarine did their job. The cryptographers who decoded the Japanese message did their job. But the system, the machinery designed to take these individual pieces of information and synthesize them into actionable intelligence, that system failed completely. And here's what troubles me. We failed because we were looking for the threats we expected instead of being ready for the threats we didn't anticipate. We prepared for sabotage instead of air attack. We assumed Japan would attack where logic said they should, not where they actually did. We let our assumptions about what was likely blind us to what was actually happening. We're still making that same mistake today. And I think this is where the story gets especially relevant for us right now. Look at how we assess threats, how we analyze intelligence, how we prepare for future attacks. The pattern that led to Pearl Harbor, focusing on expected threats while missing unexpected ones, that pattern keeps repeating. Here's what fascinates me. 60 years after Pearl Harbor, we had another catastrophic intelligence failure. September 11th, 2001, and the parallels are striking. Before 9/11s, we had warning signs. We knew terrorists wanted to attack America. We knew Al-Qaeda was planning something big. We had intelligence about suspicious flight school students. We had an FBI agent writing memos warning about terrorists learning to fly. We had intercepted communications about an upcoming attack, but we weren't looking in the right direction. We were focused on traditional threats, embassies overseas, military installations, maybe another truck bomb. We weren't prepared for terrorists to weaponize commercial airliners and fly them into buildings. It didn't fit our expectations, our assumptions about how terrorists operated. Think about it. Just like Pearl Harbor, the information existed. The warning signs were there, but the system couldn't connect the dots because we were looking for the threats we expected instead of the threats we should have imagined. The pattern repeats. Pearl Harbor taught us about intelligence failures, about the danger of mirror imaging, assuming the enemy will do what we would do. But did we learn? Did the lesson stick? Here's what the evidence tells us. Organizations are really good at preparing for the last attack. After Pearl Harbor, you can bet we made sure no one would ever surprise us with a carrier-based air attack again. After 9/11s, you can bet no one will ever hijack airliners that way again. But the next attack won't look like the last one. It never does. I find myself thinking about this a lot, because the challenge isn't learning from the past. The challenge is imagining futures we don't expect. How do you prepare for threats you can't imagine? How do you build systems that can see what you're not looking for? Think about the threats we face now. Cyber attacks, biological weapons, drone swarms, AI-enabled warfare, attacks on infrastructure. Which ones are we preparing for? Which ones fit our expectations? And which ones are we missing because they don't match our assumptions about what threats look like? Here's what troubles me. We have more intelligence capability now than ever before. More surveillance, more data, more analysis. But having more information doesn't prevent intelligence failures. It might actually make them worse. Because when you're drowning in data, it's even harder to identify the critical signals among all the noise. The Pearl Harbor lesson isn't collect more intelligence. It's question your assumptions. It's don't let expectations blind you to reality. It's build systems that can challenge conventional thinking. Look at how organizations typically work. They reward people who follow procedures, who don't make waves, who align with the consensus. That radar operator who reported the aircraft, he did exactly what he should have done. But the system dismissed his report because it didn't fit expectations. How many times are we dismissing critical information right now because it doesn't align with what we think should be happening? So as we think about that December morning in 1941 when Japanese aircraft appeared over Pearl Harbor and shattered America's sense of security, I think the question for us isn't really about aircraft carriers and battleships. The question is about how we see threats and whether we're looking in the right direction. I respect Admiral Kimmel and General Short. They were experienced officers operating with incomplete information and contradictory priorities. They made decisions that seemed reasonable based on what they knew and what they expected. But reasonable decisions based on flawed assumptions can still lead to catastrophe. Here's what the investigator in me learned from years of solving cases. The evidence is often there. The clues exist, but you have to be looking for them, and you have to be willing to see what they're actually telling you rather than what you expect them to tell you. The challenge of intelligence work, whether it's criminal investigation or national security, isn't usually that evidence doesn't exist. It's that the evidence gets lost in the noise, dismissed as unimportant, or ignored because it doesn't fit the prevailing narrative. Think about the position we're in right now. We face threats from multiple directions. Some we can see, some we can imagine, and some we haven't thought of yet. Our intelligence agencies are collecting vast amounts of data. Our analysts are looking for patterns. But are we looking in the right places? Are we questioning our assumptions? Are we building systems that can challenge consensus and surface uncomfortable possibilities? Or are we, like the commanders at Pearl Harbor, preparing for the threats we expect while missing the ones we don't? I always come back to this principle. Never judge without evidence, but also never let your expectations override what the evidence is actually showing you. That radar operator saw aircraft approaching. The evidence was right there on his screen, but the system interpreted it through the lens of expectations, and the truth got lost. The machinery we build for detecting threats, whether it's radar station and intelligence networks in 1941, or surveillance systems and data analysis today, that machinery is only as good as our willingness to believe what it's telling us, even when it contradicts our assumptions. The great philosopher George Santayana once wrote, "Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it." And here's why that matters today. Pearl Harbor taught us that intelligence failures happen when we let expectations override evidence, when we prepare for likely threats while ignoring unlikely ones, when our systems can't synthesize information fast enough to act. Yet on September 11th, 2001, we repeated those exact failures. Warning signs missed, agencies not communicating, evidence dismissed because it didn't fit expectations. Right now, as we face threats from cyber attacks to biological weapons to technologies we're just beginning to understand, the same pattern threatens us. Are we preparing for the threats we expect while missing the ones we should be imagining? Are we dismissing warning signs because they don't fit our assumptions? If we cannot remember why Pearl Harbor happened, not because we lacked intelligence, but because we were looking in the wrong direction, we're condemned to be surprised again. I'm Richard Backus, and this is the Daily History Chronicle. Tomorrow, we'll explore another moment that shaped our world. Until then, think about what assumptions shape how you see threats, and whether you're looking in the right direction. Because that's what Pearl Harbor teaches us, not just about war and history, but about how we fail to see dangers even when the evidence is right in front of us. Thank you for your time. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe. If you really enjoyed it, then please tell a friend. I hope you will join me again tomorrow for more of our shared history.